Hi everybody. You've probably heard of the rule of thirds, but have you ever tried to frame an image using quadrants? Quadrants are used if you want to create an unbalanced image. You can see here that there is a quadrant mask in dark gray, and you can probably see a rule of thirds grid in light gray. And I have some PDF versions, which there's a link to in the video's description, that you can download for free that you can use to help lay out images in advance or study for your own learning about how to frame images. I've combined this rule of thirds frame as a secondary frame to the quadrants here so that images can be created to be unbalanced as a quadrant image but have elements of balance with the rule of thirds, which is what that provides. So we're going to take a look at three different examples of how this works. Here's the first image, and standard architectural image, and let's take a look at how this lines up with the grids. The yellow grid is the quadrants and the red grid is the rule of thirds. So you can see here this lines up pretty nicely with the rule of thirds. There's a nice horizon line that aligns with this lower red line. And then the building here, the Cal SRTS building, is centered on this rule of third line. However, this is really a quadrant image. You can see here, here's the quadrant divider. We've got the preponderance of the image interest over here on the right side. As well, every single horizon element from the trees down to the water is included on the bottom half of the image. The top half of the image is reserved for the top of the building and the sky over here, which is effectively a large, visually interesting negative space. So you can see in this sample how it is that the image feels unbalanced because the preponderance of the data is weighted to one of two halves, but also feels balanced because it aligns with the rule of thirds as well. If you want to not follow the rule of thirds and just have an unbalanced image, you can do that too with stunning visual effect. And we'll see that in just a second. Here's a second image. It's framed a very similar way. It's for all intents and purposes the same basic image that we just saw. Let's take a look at why. You can see again the water tank here, centered on the rule of thirds grid. The horizon is again below the half mark. The water tank is on the right half of the image. And each quadrant has a different amount of visual interest, as well as key points of visual interest. Here the transition from foreground to background, over here the water tank, and up here some of the nice cloud work, all fall on rule of thirds lines or cross points. However, the dominant image separation in this is a quadrant separation where this half has the water tank and trees, this half has all the ground, and this quadrant up here has just sky. But this doesn't just work for architectural photos. Here, cars on the table, not actually a person, it's a wax figure. But let's take a look at how this portrait photo, or sculptural photo, however you'd like to phrase it, lines up with a quadrant and rule of thirds grid. We can see it's a fairly strong rule of thirds image with FDR's portrait over here along this vertical rule of thirds line. However, I would argue that this is really much more of a quadrant image, with all of FDR and the portrait being on the right half of the image, and then the left half being completely unbalanced, wide open, negative space. The fact that his eye here is at a rule of thirds cross point, and his tie is at a rule of thirds cross point, and the fact that this halfway dividing line is just below his earlobe contribute a little bit to what would feel balanced about this image, but ultimately it is a fairly unbalanced image. Now, in each of these cases, this was an intentional framing and composition choice on my part to create images that felt balanced along the rule of thirds lines, but also really created a sense of unbalance and heavy weighting by dividing them along the quadrant lines. So this is one way that you can use the rule of thirds as a supplement to a quadrant framing. Like I said, the quadrant creates a sense of unbalance, and then the rule of thirds creates a sense of balance. They cancel each other out. So this is part of a video series, and in the rest of the series, we're going to be taking a look at other framing types, unconventional as well as conventional rule of thirds in another video. And you can see that the rule of thirds grid has the quadrants lightened out so that you can focus on the rule of thirds composition but have it be secondary, or have a quadrant division be secondary. And some advanced type of framing as well. So these are 5 framing masks that I use when I create an image, set out to design it specifically. And you can download the PDFs, like I said earlier, there's a link below. So if the PDFs in this video, or either or, were helpful, please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track. If you have any questions about photography or framing in general, please let me know, and I'll answer those as quickly as I can. I'm pretty good about responding fairly quickly. If you have comments or suggestions, please let me know, and I'm more than happy if you have comments or suggestions for future videos, please let me know. I'm more than happy to create future videos if I have the technical know-how and equipment. And one last thing, thank you guys for watching.